notice that this URL has encoded in it the ID of the user, right? And that information is already stored in the database, in the server, right? Because the server is maintaining our status information about who's currently logged in. So it's kind of redundant having it stored here in the client, and it's a minor security issue, right? Of having this ID encoded as part of the URL. If we copy and send this over to someone, somebody could pose as us with that ID somehow. Yes. All right. So let's try and remove it from there. First, we'll try and remove it from the profile. No. Oops. Let's see. Profile. I think it's profile right here. Right. Profile. Yeah. So let's remove it from here. Right. First of all. So let's do that. So to do that, we would like to be able to navigate to the profile. We would like to navigate to the profile without having to provide the user ID, right? Because again, it's implied in the session, right? So how do we do that? If we do that, notice that if I go to the profile, well, first of all, there's no mapping to that. But I just did it, right? I just rewrote it, so I just need to refresh the page. So it renders, but notice that the controller that controls this page, notice that it's expecting the user ID to be encoded in the URL, right? We need to be able to have this controller not have to need this user ID. It's on the server, right? So how do we handle that? Well, the resolve can help us with that. I deliberately call this, I gave it a bogus name, right? Deliberately. This actually is bound to whatever this promise resolves to. And if we look at the implementation of the check login, it resolves to the user object. See that? Right? That user object is now what this entire promise resolves to. Right? So that means that here, this whatever I typed in here, right, is now available to the controller. Right? It's passed on, right, as a context, right, of where the controller is being instantiated. The template is being now provided, available, is added as a service that can be injected into the controller as a dependency, just like user service was injected. So if we go back to the controller implementation and we grab that bogus name and we go to the controller for that page, assignment, service, views, and we go to the profile controller, right? We have access to that bogus name there. It represents whatever it resolved to, right? Which is currently the user object. So if we do a console log bogus object here, and we now refresh and we look at the console here, notice that it prints out the entire user object as being passed, as being resolved as a call that we went out to the server, including the first name, last name. We would have to remove the password. That would not be a good place to put the password. We probably want to remove that. But we have the entire thing, including the ID. See that? So we don't really need this anymore. We can grab the ID right from the object here, underscore ID. See that? So that now if we refresh this, notice that we now have PO, a last name, username. We have all the information that we originally had without the need of the user ID in the URL. That makes sense, right? Obviously, choosing this as a bogus name is not a good choice. So typically, we choose some real name, right? That's descriptive. And we would have to change it here in the name. Whatever we choose here as name, that's what is being bound and can be injected into the controller as a dependency. That makes sense? So, and that's true from anywhere, right? Anywhere in the website as well. Let's use user. Now if we go to the website implementation for that controller. For website list controller, website list controller, we can inject that new dependency, right, user, and we can retrieve the ID from that object, right? And so now that we have the ID, we no longer have to include it as part of the URL, right? We can go back to the config, like we come back to the config, and there's no need for the user ID anymore. Actually, there's no need even for the user. Right? It could be just website. It is implied that it is part of the currently logged in user, right? And it would be instantiated, and so it can be, so this user and user ID can be removed from all these routes, right? Because it's already implied what the context is. Everything else, the website ID, the page ID, the widget ID, those should stay, right? We don't need the server to remember all these things. It is okay to encode that as a state as part of the client, right? But the only thing we wanted to protect was the user information, anything that could be used to derive user information and use against the owner of that information. That make sense? Right? So there, we showed you how we can use check logged in to keep track of the currently logged in user.